Welcome to the Missouri Wind and Solar Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Shank, coming to you from our store in Seymour, Missouri. Each week with my co-host and Missouri Wind's General Manager, David McDarris, we discuss the latest on renewable energy. Check out our additional educational information on our website at mwands.com. Thank you for downloading this podcast, and please subscribe.
Let's talk about lightning and thunder. And what was it? Ricky Bobby?
Theirs was shake and bake.
Shake and bake.
Shake and bake.
We're going to be lightning and thunder.
I'm lightning, you're thunder. You do all the talking and I do all the work.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. I'm not even going to comment on that. Okay. Let's talk about lightning. Let's talk about grounding. What do we need to do to protect our quite often substantial investments from getting blowed up? As Bill Murray said in Stripes, he got blowed up.
He got blowed up. We don't want to blow things up. Unintentionally anyway.
So let's talk about a typical wind turbine. Let's talk about a solar, and then let's talk about inside the building. So do we want to put a lightning rod on top of our wind turbine?
No. The lightning rod on top, no, we do not want to do that. For one, it's almost... I
like the look of disdain that you guys missed that.
It's almost impossible to do because you have to be able to go 360 degrees in a circle with the turbine and not twist your wires, so it'd be a little bit hard. But the thing that's going to be struck there will be the actual tower itself. So grounding the tower itself is probably a good thing to be doing. So 8-foot ground rod like you would your home, drive it in the ground, and then actually just running. I would tell most people to actually run the actual ground wire, your number 4 bare copper ground wire, just run it up the tower, most of the way up the tower, using like a banding clamp to hold it on, like you use for automotive, just a compression clamp of something, and then ground it off that way. That way, if lightning hits the tower, it's going to take the path of least resistance first. So it's going to, not to say that it can't go back through your equipment, but it will dispel most of the energy, especially if you have a tower built like ours where it's not actually in the ground. It's actually on a concrete. It's attached to a concrete. Not to say it won't get through there, but it's not as effectively getting through there. And so more electricity would be allowed to.
And that's the thing. We want to make it easier.
Right. We want to make it as easy as possible for the electricity to get in the ground and get away.
That's one of the things. I know we had talked about this in something else about even as far as having a bend in the wire, even as the power comes down even from the wind turbines. If you don't have a bend, it's even better. So the more you would not have a bend in that, the better. So backing up and saying that, if you've got like we would, how deep is that concrete pad out there?
It's about a 2 foot depth.
About 2 foot cube.
About 2 foot cube, yeah.
I mean, so when you poured that, would you want to put a piece of PVC in there and leave a open space to?
Either that, or at the same time, you can could actually put your grounding rod right through the wet concrete, drive it in the ground, and be done with it. Or you can drive it right beside it doesn't matter so long. But it needs to be in the earth. I mean, it needs to be earth grounded, not concrete grounded, earth grounded. So, I mean, there's a reason they don't put, when they're building your home, they don't put the actual concrete rod or the actual ground rod just directly into your concrete. I mean, it's not, because it is very, when you're dealing with lightning, you're dealing with a lot of power. I mean, in some cases, you're letting on enough power to power a small town for the rest of the year if you could capture that energy, So it can blow out concrete. It can blow things away from it, and so you don't want it to cause crack in your concrete or heat in your concrete or anything of that nature, compromising that. So earth grounding is the best. That's where I would do my tower. Like I said, just run it, just run that copper ground wire right up the tower and use a actual clamp to hold it on the side. And that way, if lightning does happen to strike your tower, there again, you're trying to disperse it as quickly as possible. I'm not saying that it's going to 100% save it, but it's going to be better than letting it all just go directly into the tower and then directly down the line.
Okay. How about your solar?
Solar, you want to ground the mount itself, not so much the solar panels, but the mount itself.
Okay, like in our case, we're using Unirac
A lot of times we're using Unirack, and it's put up on a roof. It's aluminum. Aluminum's not the best conductor of electricity, and the panel frames are aluminum as well. But if you have that will be the simplest, easiest way for that electricity to get out, is once it hits that solar panel or hits that rack, it's going to look for the simplest path versus having to run down all through the electric lines of that solar panel array and then back into a combiner box and on in. There again, not to say some of it doesn't get there, but you have a chance of getting rid of a lot of that energy before it, instead of taking the full brunt of it right down your lines into your controller or into your...
So if you're using something like a tracker, is a ground built into the tracker, or...
No, you have to ground your trackers as well. If you were to look on our tracker, you would actually see that there is a grounding unit that we actually wrapped wire around the base of the unit, and then up the tracker unit, and then we actually have a ground rod, just like I told you, beside the concrete driven in the earth, and it's an 8-foot ground rod. An 8-foot is the standard, copper ground rod, and try to use copper if you can get it. There again, it's the best conductor of electricity right now that's out there, so that's cost effective anyway. But just a number 4 bare ground wire.
Okay. And so that's actually got the panels or the turbine grounded. What about coming into the actual lines coming in? Our typical fuses,
breakers. We're going to typically breaker it. There again, lightning is a very, very destructive part of nature, and it tries to kill everything it touches. And so breakers have it's just milliseconds that they take to trip, but sometimes they can't stop all the energy from getting on through. And so we have multiple protections. First was, of course, grounding the panels, or not the panels, but the racking and or the tower, and or both. And then the next thing we're going to do is put in breakers to try to stop anything that did get in. If it gets through the breakers, at that point, we're going to put in some type of especially if we're dealing with midnight controllers or outback, we're going to put in it's a arc suppressor. It's a huge arc suppressor that they're relatively cheap. And I say relative, I mean, compared to a controller, they're extremely cheap. Controllers $600. These are going to be, $80, $90, but I can go buy 6 of them versus one controller if I can save my controller.
Yeah.
And what they are is you look on the side of them and they're clear, and there's a reason that they're clear. It's because if something does hit like lightning, there's a big MOSFET bank in there on it, as you'll see, and it blows. And then that way you can actually see that it's blown. I mean, you can actually physically see, hey, there's something that didn't look like that yesterday before the storm, and now it looks bad. And then all of a sudden your controller's not working. There's nothing coming into your controller. There's no power coming into your controller. And that's what's done it. It's the actual arc suppressor and we carry them from midnight, and that's the next deal. So we're going to have grounding on our tower and our racking for our solar panels. Then we're going to put breakers in line before we get to the controller. And then from that point, we're going to try to use the arc suppressor for our midnight controllers, and you can even use them. And we actually put arc suppressors on like our 3 PALs. We actually use an arc suppressor there, and it's going to typically bust. And then on the other side of the charge controller, going to the batteries, we will also put another breaker in. So if something happens to have got through all those steps first
and burn up the
controller, we hope that by then we can have slowed it down enough that the last breaker then can hold it before it gets to the battery bank, because that's the number one investment we're trying to protect is our batteries. I mean, that really is. It's always our number one investment is our batteries. And then after that fact, if we get through the battery bank, we've got one more protection, and that's to breaker or to fuse between the inverter or whatever you're consuming power needs to have some type of fuse or breaker there again, so it doesn't. And it actually helps on the other side of it in case something gets struck on the far side, on the inverter side. Maybe you're hooked up to the house through your panel, and the house itself gets struck, and then it starts feeding back through the wiring and then back into the inverter. It's going to cause the inverter to die. There again, the fuse is not just a one-way fuse. It knows pop the other way as well. And so it would pop before it could get back to the battery. There again, we're trying to protect the batteries at all costs. I mean, we're putting all the protections in. So there's a lot of people that want to skimp and, I'll just, these are pretty cheap insurance policies. If you've ever had something happen that you needed insurance and you didn't have it, you'll know exactly what I mean. And you're like, that $20 could have saved me $2,000 pretty easily. So. Well,
so do you? We talk a lot about grounding. So is your controller grounded in your house?
No.
Okay.
No, you don't ground the controller.
Okay.
And for the most part, depending on how your inverter is, you'll need to call us and talk about your inverter because we'll have some questions about that. So I'm not going to make a blanket statement here on inverters because if you were grounding your inverter, there's certain ways you have to do it in relative to the GFIs to work in your home and things of that nature. So if not, it's just going to trip all the GFIs because it's going to think there's a ground fault. It just actually thinks that there's a ground fault happening, and that's what a GFI is. It's a ground fault interrupter. I mean, when it detects there's a ground fault, through water or a line being nicked or whatever the case, and it automatically trips it and says, nope, I'm not going to do that. Water's being the number one case that it would do it.
How do you handle your batteries when we're
batteries? You never ground. You do not ground your batteries. Grounding your batteries is going to cause all kinds of trouble. Just don't ground your batteries.
Okay. But what about if they're in some kind of metal case or something? Still,
no. The metal case you can ground. It's fine, so long as the metal case is not hooked up to the battery. I mean, to the actual positive and negative of the batteries. If not, you take a chance. If something was to get it for some reason, there was anything to hit the hot on that case, and you have that thing grounded, it's just going to dispel all the energy directly through the case into the ground. You're going to actually lose all your power into the ground because energy is always looking to go back. I mean, it's always looking to get in the ground. I mean, as quickly as possible. So, and it's always looking to create a loop. I mean, is what you're trying to do. Lightning's even trying to create its loop. I mean, it's going from one point
home.
Yeah, it's going from one part down to the other. So what you want to do is give it the fastest path back to home. I mean, you want it to get home as quickly as possible. But grounding batteries, no, don't ground your batteries.
Okay. Anything else we need to consider in grounding?
Not so much grounding. No, grounding, fusing, very important, both of them. You need to do both of them.
Incredibly cheap insurance policies.
Yeah, just insurance policies. I mean, 99% of systems will work without grounding and fusing, and 98 of those wind up having issues.
And 100 of them will blow up.
So it's, and the other 2% never called me and told me it happened. But it's a cheap insurance policy. It's really, it's just a way to ensure you might not be home when it happens. That's what I always tell people. You might, if you're home when it happens, maybe you get to put that fire out that it started. If you're not home when it happens, you get to come home and redo all this again. Yeah. Plus rebuild the home. I mean,
batteries are the least of your your problems.
So
okay, all right. Well, I think that wraps it up. And Larry, a little shout out to you. I know you helped us with this podcast. Thank you very much. Give Carol a hug, and we look forward to seeing you guys back over here in Missouri sometime soon. Thanks again for listening to the podcast, and we'll look forward to coming back to bring you more podcasts later.
Thank you for downloading and listening to the podcast today. If you have a question that you'd like to hear us discuss on the podcast, email us at radio@mwands.com. You can follow us on our website, mwands.com, or subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. Check out our store at mwands.com and buy some stuff. Buying stuff allows us to continue to produce our educational broadcasts, like our podcasts and YouTube videos. And most importantly, it keeps Lucy's doggy chicken treats coming. Thanks again.